Okay, are we streaming? We're streaming. I'm just checking my audio. Hopefully you can hear me. I gotta check the audio source to make sure that I'm not. Okay, are we streaming? We're streaming. I can hear myself. That's good. Okay, that answered that question, I think. Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for being a part of the Hot Zone. Yep, okay, we're on the right audio. I'm going to want to do a quick live for you tonight and answer some of the questions that came up on the CBN live that I did. Let me, well, we're fine. Wanted to answer some of the questions that came up on the other live that we did and tell you a little more about some things, answer some questions. On this platform, obviously, don't have quite as many people online. We had like 4,000 people watching or something, so it was a little crazy with the comments. Here, we won't have quite so many, and hopefully I can get to more of your comments and questions. So thank you all for coming on. Thank you for, now it's very high volume. Okay, I'll turn the volume down a little bit. I suppose you could turn your volume down a little bit, maybe. How's that? Is that a little better? I don't want to blow your eardrums out, that's for sure. So first I want to talk about moral clarity. That's because I've heard a lot of comments, a lot of people talking about, you know, making some sort of moral parity between what Israel is doing in Gaza and say what Azerbaijan is doing to Armenia. So I've had some Armenian friends who are really not very happy with Israel because Israel supported Azerbaijan and gave them weapons or sold them weapons that Azerbaijan then subsequently used to attack Ukraine. Personally, I don't think Israel was thinking, hey, let's sell some weapons to Azerbaijan so they can attack this tiny little country of 2 million people that, you know, we don't have anything to do with. I don't think that really crossed their minds. I think Azerbaijan is against Iran, which, as you know, is Israel's arch nemesis, and they also get, Israel also gets fuel, natural gas, oil, from Azerbaijan, and so they have a partnership that way. And I think Armenia was really just an afterthought. The thought that that Israeli weapons would be used in Armenia really didn't factor into their radar. It wasn't what, you know, on their radar, so to speak, here in Israel. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't have been. It probably should have been. They should have thought a little more about that, and maybe thought a little harder about their choice of friends. I get it that Israel wants to support whoever's against Iran. I get it that Armenia is not too happy when one of those people, one of those countries attacks them. But I don't think it's right for Armenians to try to draw a moral line between what Israel is doing to Hamas in Gaza and what Azerbaijan has done in the Nagorno-Karabakh or in Artsakh to Armenia. It's late at night. Hang on. I gotta get something for my throat here. I've been sucking down these lozenges for my sore throat for like crazy. You have to make a moral distinction here, because if you're going to say that what Azerbaijan did to Armenia was wrong, and you're going to look at it from an objective standpoint, you've got to say, well, Azerbaijan was acting in what it felt to be its own nation's best interest. Azerbaijan wants at least a piece of Armenia in order to have a corridor between Azerbaijan and its exclave, Nakhichevan. If you're not familiar with that region, I would suggest that you pull up a map now. Matter of fact, let's do that. Maybe I can do this here. Let's try this. Azerbaijan, and if I go over here, exclave, and look at maps. If you're not familiar with that region, if you can see this, I would suggest that you pull up a map now. Okay, here's Armenia. Let's do that. Maybe I can do this here, right here. Azerbaijan, and this is Azerbaijan over on the right, exclave, and look at. And this little box down here, if you're not familiar with that region, you can see this. I would suggest that you pull up a map now. Okay, here's Armenia. Check and make sure you maybe I can do this here. See what I'm right here pointing out. Azerbaijan, and this is Azerbaijan over on the right, exclave, and look at. And this little box down here, if you're not familiar with that region, you can see this. I would suggest that you pull up a map now. Okay, here's Armenia. Check and make sure you maybe I can do this here. See what I'm right here pointing out. We'll close this, and this is Azerbaijan over on the right, exclave, and look at. And this little box down here, if you're not familiar with that region, you can see this. I would suggest that you pull up a map now. Okay, here's Armenia. Check and make sure you maybe I can do this here. See what I'm right here pointing out. We'll close this, and this is Azerbaijan over on the right, exclave, and look at. All right. And this little box, Azerbaijan, if you're not familiar with that Armenia, I would suggest that you pull up here. Okay, here's Armenia. Check and make sure you maybe I can do this here. See what I'm right here. Azerbaijan wants this, and this is Azerbaijan road, right, exclave, and look at. All right. And this little box, Azerbaijan, if you're not familiar with that Armenia, they have a tiny other little beefs. Here's Armenia. Check and make sure you maybe I can do this here. And see what I'm right here. Armenia, Azerbaijan wants this, and this is Azerbaijan road, right, exclave, and look at. The map now has this little Azerbaijan, if you're not familiar with Armenia, they have a tiny other little beefs. Here's Armenia. Make sure you maybe I can do this here. And this was the right here. Armenia, Azerbaijan wants this, and this is Azerbaijan road, right, exclave, and look at. The map now has this Azerbaijan and Azerbaijan. If you're not familiar with Armenia, they have a tiny other little beefs. Here's Armenia. Make sure you maybe I can do this here. And if you're going to hold Armenia, Azerbaijan wants this, and this is Azerbaijan. If you're going to hold that attacking a sovereign country because you want some of its land to put a road across, or attacking a group of people and displacing them from their land that they have occupied for literally millennia, if you're going to say that's wrong, you're taking a moral position. It's wrong to do that to people because they don't deserve to be kicked off their land. Okay. So then if you're going to apply that in that situation, that moral clarity, then you've got to apply that same moral standard when you're looking at, for example, Russia and Ukraine. Did Ukraine attack Russia? No, it did not. I was there. I was on the line of contact the day before the war started. And Ukraine was not attacking Russia. It was not even attacking the separatist areas that Russia was de facto controlling that are actually still Ukraine. Uh-oh. Are we okay now? I think maybe there are some audio issues with that desktop thing. I think that was the problem. I'm gonna have to play with that a little bit. Okay. Got to make sure this is working right. I'll ask my wife, who I think is watching. Okay now. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, now, so let's apply this same moral logic. It's wrong to kick people off their land. It's wrong to kill innocent people. It's wrong to invade countries that don't belong to you. Let's apply that to Ukraine. Again, I was there. Russia invaded Ukraine. I saw what Russia did. Russia visited many of the same horrors upon Ukrainians that Hamas visited on Israel on October 7th. In Bucha, in Irpin, I went there after the Russians pulled out. There were bodies laying in the streets that had been summarily executed, their hands tied behind their backs, civilians. There were girls that had been raped as young as 4 years old and then murdered by Russian soldiers. That's wrong. With that same moral clarity in mind, I can say with no uncertainty whatsoever that what Russia has done and is doing in Ukraine is morally reprehensible. It's wrong. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, I heard Ukraine is a corrupt country. What if it was a corrupt country? Is it right to go to a corrupt country and murder innocent people in the street and rape their little girls? No, it's not. It's not morally justifiable to do that. Now, having spent 6 months or more in Ukraine over the last year and a half, I can tell you Ukraine is no more corrupt than the United States, and probably a whole lot less. I heard somebody report on Tucker Carlson that Special Operations Forces got shredded coming up from the Mediterranean into Gaza. I've not heard anything about Special Forces getting shredded coming into Gaza. I've not heard anything about any casualties on the IDF side since the operation on the ground has started. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, so if we look at this from a moral issue and say what Hamas did to Israel was wrong, then we have to also say that what Russia did to Ukraine was wrong. People have tried to, even Tucker Carlson has tried to find this justification that Zelensky is a clown, Ukraine is corrupt, there's a bunch of Nazis there. There's not. I've been there, like I said, I've been all over that country. I've never found a legit Nazi. I don't even know what you mean Nazi. If you want to talk Nazi, let's look at what Hamas did. Hamas are much closer to Nazis. So with that sense of moral clarity, you can look at any situation. You can say, who's on the right side of this? I have no problem saying that I would like to see Israel decimate Hamas and absolutely wipe it off the face of the earth, because I saw what Hamas did to Israeli women and children with my own eyes, and it was horrific. I would also like to say, I have no problem saying that I hope Russia gets absolutely decimated in Ukraine and gets kicked out back to its country and is broken and weak for the next generation, unable to pose a threat to anybody because of what I saw with my own eyes that they did to innocent people in Ukraine. In the same way, I saw what Azerbaijan did to those people, displacing them from their homes, killing them, randomly bombing civilian areas. I talked to several old women who had their homes blown up in Stepanakert. And so I can unequivocally say that what Azerbaijan did to Armenia was wrong. And politics be damned, really. I mean, if you think about it, that we have this tribal mindset in America that says, well, I got to stick with my team. The Republicans are saying that Ukraine is a bad idea. We got to be against Ukraine. Well, we got to be for Israel. Well, you know what? You can't support Israel in what they're doing to eradicate Hamas without supporting Ukraine and what they're doing to kick Russia out of their own country. You just not and be morally honest. You have to be intellectually dishonest to support one and oppose the other. Me personally, I simply look at it from a moral standpoint. And people, if I want to know who's in the right and who's in the wrong, all I have to do is ask myself, who intentionally attacked innocent civilians? Azerbaijan did, Russia did, Hamas did. Israel did not. I've not seen proof that Ukraine has intentionally attacked civilians. And Armenia may have in Ganja, and that would have been wrong. Two things can be true at once, right? You can say what Russia did to Ukraine is wrong, but when Ukraine executes prisoners of war, which has happened on a very limited basis, it's not endorsed or anything, but I mean, I've seen it that it happened, and I called it out. And I said that's wrong, Ukraine. You should do something about that. You should prosecute those people. In fact, they did. That brings me to my second measure of how I know who's in the right and who's in the wrong in any conflict. And that is, who would allow me to report the truth from their country, even if it was negative to that country? And who would not? I've done it in Ukraine. There was an incident where a bunch of Russian soldiers were captured, and they were, tied up. They were captured by the Ukrainians. They were legit prisoners of war, but I'm sure they had been in a big firefight, and they had just killed some of the Ukrainian guys' buddies. And so one of the Ukrainian soldiers, who was very mad, walked down the line of Russian soldiers and shot each of the Russian soldiers right in the leg. Shot him in one leg, and they collapsed on the ground. That's absolutely wrong, morally reprehensible. And that guy was later arrested and tried for war crimes. But at the time, when it first came out, I was in Ukraine, and I got on TV and said, this happened, we see the video, and that is absolutely wrong, and Ukraine should do something about it. And you know what? Ukraine didn't censure me, didn't kick me out, didn't slit my throat. If I had tried to do that in Russia, I guarantee you, if I had been on the Russian side of that and I had called out Russia for some of the obvious war crimes that they were committing, I would not be standing here today. So that tells me that Ukraine is the right side in that conflict. Same thing here in Israel. If I were to say, I saw something on the front lines today, and it was wrong, and so I'm going to call out Israel. Israel might not be happy with me for reporting that, but as long as it didn't compromise operational security, they're probably not going to kick me out, and they're certainly not going to kill me. Imagine if I tried to do any reporting at all from the Hamas side right now as an American journalist. I would probably not last long. So again, we need to, I believe that it's imperative that we as journalists and you as civilians look at every conflict that you see, and if you want to cut through all the crap, if you want to cut through all of the media spin and the hype and the way that they gin things up for ratings, you just have to ask yourself, what's the moral thing to do here? Who's in the right morally? And screw the politics. I don't care if Democrats are supporting Ukraine and I'm not a Democrat. Well, then it's tough. It's very possible that Democrats might be supporting Ukraine for all the wrong reasons. I don't know. But I don't care. I'm not going to make my decisions on who to support that way. I'm going to make my decisions based on morality. Full stop. That's it. I'm done. Okay? All right, so I wanted to get that out there. Somebody asked about my monkeys, and so I wanted to show you a picture of my monkeys. I think it might screw the audio up, but let's see if this will work here. Make my decisions based on morality. Full stop. That's it. I'm done. Okay? All right, so I wanted to get that out there. Somebody asked about my monkeys, and so I wanted to show you a picture of my monkeys. I think it might screw the audio up, but let's see if this will work here. Make my decisions.
Are you drinking without me, Mama?
Morality. Full stop. That's it. I'm done. Okay? All right, so I wanted to get that out there. Somebody asked about my monkey. Okay, I don't know if you can see that, but that's my monkey, Missy, and she goes for a ride with me. She rides around town on my shoulders. So that's my little monkey. I've got two of those. Okay. Do you think 400 Jewish families in Russia should come to Israel? The rabbi at the airport was shut down for Muslims hunting Jewish people in Dagestan. Do I think they should come to Israel? Sure. I mean, I think they should do whatever they feel like doing. People ought to be able to live where they want to live. As long as you're not, stealing from somebody, breaking the law, okay, go live where you want to live. There were a lot of Russians on the plane coming from Tbilisi, Georgia, when I came here a couple days after the attack. And they were bringing their families with them, and they were coming back to Israel to join the military and to go fight. Did you know that Israel right now has more troops under arms than the United States military? The Israeli military is now larger than the U.S. military by almost 100,000 soldiers. That's pretty amazing. For a country as small as Israel, that is astounding. Okay, so let's go to more questions. Should we listen to mainstream news? Should we listen to the mainstream news? If you like, I think you can read between the lines with what you get from the mainstream media. You can, because it's not like they're going to just simply lie to you outright. I mean, like, I know Trey Yingst from Fox. I was with him today, and he's doing his best to tell the truth out here, and I don't have any problem with what he's reporting at all. I think that where the mainstream media tries to shape the narrative or shape your opinion is in what they choose not to report, and how they choose to contextualize the reporting that they do. Of course, it's like I told you yesterday, it's all very, very packaged up, right? So when I go do like that report that I did yesterday on the hospital in Beersheba, I interviewed the president of the university that the hospital is attached to for 20 minutes. And I got to use, like 39 seconds of that interview in the live, in the package that I put together that aired on the 700 Club today. Now, I did my best to choose the most pertinent quotes that had to do with the story. And I did my best to present that in a balanced way in 39 seconds. But I can't show you the whole interview. I don't have time. So if you want to see the whole interview, you're going to have to go to my podcast, and I will put up the entire interview on my podcast for you to watch. You can watch it end to end and make up your own mind. But that is one of the ways that every media shapes what you understand about the issue, is by what they choose to show you of what they collect. They collect this much information and they show you this much information. Part of that is just the nature of this business, and there's not much you can do about it. Except, forums like this where you can ask questions and I can talk to you and I can explain things in detail and in depth. That's better, right? And that's why you think the monkeys look just like me? I think I look just like them. Yeah, they're cute monkeys. Thank you for the, $50, Ryan Gillespie. Super chat. Thank you very much. That's awesome. Very kind of you. Thank you. This thing is locking up. I gotta reopen it here so I can see the chats. Should the U.S. be militarily helping Israel? when God has always told Israel to rely on him? Well, okay. We are supposed to rely on God for our provision, protection. But God never gave a man a shovel. If God gives you a shovel, I think it would be a sin for you to stand there and wish for a hole to appear in the ground. So, God very often sent other nations in the Old Testament to save Israel or to punish Israel or to, help Israel in some way. So I don't see a problem with Israel accepting help from the United States. I think God can use the United States for good purposes to help Israel. Is that fair enough? All right, let's go on. When the police came, did they check and make sure I was all right? My wife is not going to panic. She doesn't panic. When I was up on the roof the other night, the police, or somebody heard me up there or saw me up there, called the police, and the police came up to check that, make sure I wasn't a Hamas terrorist. Now, why a Hamas terrorist would have been on the roof of a building with a light talking to a camera is beyond me, but they were just being extra cautious. Everybody in Israel is being extra cautious these days for obvious reasons. They still believe that there might be some of the terrorists who came through the fence on October 7th alive and roaming around Israel just waiting to strike somewhere else. So everybody's a little on edge, and I understand that. No problem. I just said, hey, no problem. If you don't want me here, I'll leave. That's okay. We're cool. And they said, how did you get up there? Because they couldn't figure out how to get up there. And I said, the ladder over here, the hatch was open or was unlocked. It was unlocked because earlier in the week, somebody I know had picked the lock and had unlocked it, but I didn't tell them that part. Okay, hey, there's another super chat with a question. I guarantee you, you give me $20 and I will answer your question. Do I think Biden is supporting Ukraine due to his family's prior business dealings in Ukraine? Ukraine is corrupt. How do you know Ukraine is corrupt? Have you been to Ukraine? Did you hear it on the internet? Why do you believe that Ukraine is so corrupt? Now, like I said, I've spent more than half a year there. And I've gotten very close with some people that are very high up in government. My wife knows them. We've gone out to dinner with them. We've been to their homes. We've gotten to know the president's right-hand man, who literally sits in the office next door to the president. Vladimir Zelensky was elected by the Ukrainian people as a Trump-like figure. He was not a politician. He was an entertainer. Do you remember that Donald Trump was an entertainer as well? Donald Trump appeared on WWE. He wasn't just a businessman. Vladimir Zelensky was a businessman. He owned the largest television network in Ukraine. And he was a comedian. He was an entertainer. He was not a politician. And that's what the people wanted because they were tired of the corrupt politicians. And they hired Vladimir Zelensky to come in and address the corruption, to drain the swamp, as it were. I would submit to you that he's done a pretty good job at that, and he's still doing a pretty good job at that. I could list for you a long list of very high Ukrainian officials who have been fired for corruption since Zelensky came into office. Now, there's always sort of a lag in people's understanding of places that they don't live in. So if I were to say Colombia, for example, the nation of Colombia, the first thing many of you might think about is Pablo Escobar and Medellin cartel and drugs and cartels and danger I'm not going to Colombia. That's super dangerous. And if this was the 1980s, he would have been right. But it's not the 1980s. Pablo Escobar is long gone. Medellin is actually a very nice place to vacation. You should go there. It's cheap, it's beautiful, and it's safe as long as you don't try to buy, sell, or traffic drugs. Are there still gangs there? Yeah. Is there still crime? A little. But it's actually safer statistically safer in Colombia than it is in Panama, where I live. So people's understanding of the danger in Colombia has a lag time. It's the same way in Ukraine. After the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine was essentially a failed state. It was Wild West. Anything goes. You do whatever you want because there really was no real strong central authority. And a climate of corruption grew up where if you wanted to get anything done, you pretty much had to pay somebody off. And the people got real tired of that. So they hired a president who didn't do much to address it. They had a revolution in 2014 in Maidan Square. I was there. And they kicked out that president. And they hired Poroshenko as another president. Poroshenko was slightly better than the previous guy, but he was still corrupt. And everybody knew it. And he's actually a very nice guy. I've met him, I've interviewed him. Poroshenko, I mean, as far as, he's not like a Bond villain. He's a businessman and he's known to be pretty corrupt. And so they kicked him out and they voted in Zelensky. Now, Zelensky might be somewhat corrupt as well. I don't know for sure. But I can tell you what I do know is that he has taken a lot of steps to try to get rid of the corruption, such as arresting some of the oligarchs, some of the ones that Biden worked with, such as firing the entire military recruiting command because they were taking bribes from people who didn't want to serve in the military, and even firing some of the very high up people in his own cabinet that he found were siphoning off money that was coming into Ukraine. I've seen them bust arms smuggling rings that were trying to take some of the weapons that are needed for the war and sell them out the back door. They caught them, they arrested them, and they prosecuted them. So if you want to say Ukraine is corrupt, you're going to have to bring me some better proof. And I would venture to say, I would submit to you that Ukraine is perhaps as corrupt as the United States, but probably not that bad. And that's not even touching Russia. Russia is an absolute criminal state. I mean, the state institution is a criminal gang. It's a mafia-run country. Vladimir Putin is the top mafia guy. If you don't believe me, go read any book by Bill Browder. And Bill Browder knows what he's talking about. There's one called Red Notice that is absolutely mind-boggling what Vladimir Putin did to Bill Browder and his company. Just mind-boggling. So go look at that, okay? So do I think Biden is supporting Ukraine due to his family's prior business dealings? No. I think he's supporting Ukraine because we are contractually bound to support NATO, and if NATO's threatened, we have to go over there. Okay. But I think the bigger reason, if I had to guess, why Biden is supporting Ukraine is because it distracts from his problems at home. And it makes him look good to his buddies in the World Economic Forum. Now, I'll share with you a little secret. Vladimir Zelensky really despises Joe Biden. Doesn't respect him, doesn't like him at all. He likes the money that comes from the United States, of course. If you were president of Ukraine and you were looking at the annihilation of your entire country, and your country was about to be subsumed into a criminal state next door, wouldn't you go wherever you had to go and ask for money and take money from whoever you could get it from to get the arms you needed to fight that? I would. So I don't blame Zelensky for asking for money. That doesn't mean I think that we can afford to give it to him, but I certainly don't blame him for asking for it. Now, bear in mind that Vladimir Zelensky has a 91% approval rating in Ukraine with the Ukrainians. What's Joe Biden's approval rating? 30-something%? I think maybe Joe Biden is trying to support Vladimir Zelensky because he's hoping some of that mojo would rub off. I'm being facetious there, but so you asked me for my opinion. That's my opinion. Okay, let's go on. But thank you very much for that super thanks. Have I heard anything about Putin's condition? Not any more than you have. You appreciate the fact that Israel doesn't want the U.S. to get involved in this war. It shows respect and strength, yes, and it also shows the fact that they don't want the U.S. telling them what to do or how to do it. Israel, more than most, understands that anything the United States gives to anybody comes with strings attached, and they want to keep from being beholden to the United States any more than they already are, which is a lot. Okay? Did Zelensky persecute churches? Okay, good. Good question. There was a story that came out that Zelensky was persecuting the Christian church in Ukraine. That's categorically untrue. Here's what happened. There are two big churches, denominations in Ukraine. One is the Russian Orthodox and one is the Ukrainian Orthodox. Now, they used to be the same deal. Oh, wait, before that goes by, Shauna, thank you for the 1999. I'll answer that question in just a second. Let's talk about the churches. Okay. There were two big denominations, the Russian Orthodox and Ukrainian Orthodox. They used to be the same. There was a church split several years back over some liturgical issues and stuff and political issues. And so the Ukrainian church kind of went off on its own. Now, ever since the days of the Soviet Union, you probably know and remember that the Soviet Union was not friendly to the Christian church at all, right? And they discouraged people from attending church. They closed down churches. They turned them into storehouses and things like that. They even demolished some of them. They persecuted people who went to churches, et cetera, et cetera. But the Russian Orthodox Church is very, very entrenched. It's part and parcel of Russian culture. They knew they weren't going to get rid of that. So what the Soviet Union did was they went in and they placed KGB agents in all the churches and made them priests and replaced some of the legit priests with KGB agents. Now, the head bishop of the current Russian Orthodox Church in Russia is a guy named Kirill. And Bishop Kirill is a known card-carrying KGB agent since the first, like since the Soviet Union days. And he's risen through the ranks to become the top guy in the Russian Orthodox Church. When the war in Ukraine started, the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine had some KGB agents in it posing as priests. And those guys were caught passing along sensitive information about the Ukrainian military movements and strength and things like that to Russia. And they have proof of that. They picked up signals intelligence, radio signals coming out of the churches from the priests in the Russian Orthodox churches that were sending sensitive information to Russia. And so Vladimir Zelensky closed those Russian Orthodox churches and kicked out the priests. Now, that's what happened. I was there. Russia is very good at twisting what is happening and putting out a narrative that they know that Americans are going to be offended by. And so Russia took that and twisted it just a little and started just flooding the social media networks and airwaves with the news that Vladimir Zelensky had outlawed the Christian church. It's just not true. I went to a Christian church the whole time I was there. And my family went with me. And I went in many Ukrainian Christian or Ukrainian Orthodox churches. They were still open, still having services. I attended some of them. So I hope that answers that question. Now, let me get back to, oh my gosh, my voice is killing me. Will George Thomas join you for a live stream and answer questions? Thank you for the $20, Lance. George is resting tonight. We're back in Jerusalem. He's staying in a different place. And so we may be back together, but tomorrow I'm going up by myself. I'm going to the West Bank. So pray for me, because that's a real dangerous area right now. But I'm going to go do some reporting from the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And George is not coming with me, so I don't know if we'll see him again or not. Shauna, do I agree with how much money Biden has given Ukraine? Okay. Here's how that calculus goes in my mind. First of all, we have to make a choice. Do you want America to be influential on the world stage? Should we be able to influence world events, geopolitics? If you say no, then we should never give a dime to anybody. And we shouldn't collect near as much in taxes either. That would be great. That'd make me happy. But what you would be doing then is relegating America to an irrelevant entity in the world. We would have not much influence. We would still have influence economically. We could boycott people like China or something and, affect them that way. But if we want to affect the world as a country, we have to be involved in the world. And as a global superpower, giving money and arms is one way we do that. Now, I've always argued that arms are durable and fungible. And that means that if we're giving weapons to any country, that sooner or later those weapons might be shooting back at us, maybe 50 years from now. But those weapons will be around for a long time, and they may end up shooting back at us. That was always my stance up until Ukraine. Ukraine is slightly different because a lot of the weapons that we're giving to Ukraine are big, massive, missile launchers and stuff like that we can actually turn off. Like, those things have kill switches on them, some of them, or we can geolocate them. We know where they are, and it's not going to be easy for them to, secretly sell a, Patriot missile system out the back door to North Korea or someplace. That's not going to happen. So, and besides, Ukraine is actually using the heck out of everything we're giving them, and they need more if they're going to win. So, I've seen it. I've seen them put it. They fire those howitzers we give them, those M777s, till the barrels practically melt. I mean, they are using everything we're sending them. Trust me. Hang on. Just gonna get a drink of water here. Okay, so if we are going to try to influence world events, sorry about that, as a country, we need to do that somehow, and one of the ways we do that is with weapons and with money. If we are going to try to be involved in Ukraine, is there a good reason for us to be involved in Ukraine at all? Well, we do have contractual obligations to our allies in NATO, and they were very, very worried about the Ukraine invasion. And so then the next question you have to ask is, do we want our allies to trust us? And I would say, personally, I think I want our allies to trust us. Otherwise, we can't depend on them if we ever need them. The third question is, do we want our enemies to fear us? And if we do want our enemies to fear us, then we need to make good on the promises that we make to our allies. Or our enemies and adversaries will know that they can roll over Lithuania because it's a small country, and we know the United States is weak, cowardly. They're not going to do anything about it. So if we want our allies to trust us and our enemies to fear us, we have to be involved. In the case of Russia versus Ukraine, Russia is our second largest adversary on planet Earth and has been for quite a while. Now, they're much smaller than the United States, and their economy, I say smaller not space-wise, but economy-wise, GDP-wise, they're only about the size of Texas economically, and their military budget's smaller, quite a bit smaller, about a tenth. Some cats fighting down there. So now we have to ask ourselves, if we need to be involved over there, then what's the best way to get involved? Do we want to put troops on the ground? Probably not. We don't want two nuclear powers going up against each other. So if this is really a contest between the United States and Russia, and Ukraine is willing to be the football in that contest, then I think that's what has to happen. Now, from a monetary standpoint, the amount of money that the United States has currently already given to Ukraine directly is less than $70 billion. I'm sure you've heard numbers bandied about all the way up to like 200 billion, but that's not true. This is how they lie with statistics. Of the initial 120, 130 billion that they supposedly pledged to Ukraine, most of that was not to be given to Ukraine until future years, all the way out to like 2032 or longer, if Ukraine's even still around by then. So that's money that we've said, we'll give you if you still need it going out there. But we haven't actually given it yet. A large portion of that money, about $4.1 billion of it, was going actually to pay for U.S. troops to go sit on the ground in Poland and Hungary and places like that, Romania, the Netherlands, to bolster NATO. So Ukraine doesn't directly benefit from that money either. About $9 billion of that money actually went right to the Pentagon to replace old obsolete equipment that they had given away to Ukraine that was worth about $3.5 billion. So it was like they gave away their old toys and we paid them $9 billion to get new toys. That didn't go directly to Ukraine. The $3.5 billion worth of arms did, but that was stuff we were going to get rid of anyway. And so this is how the politicians lie with statistics. They quote these numbers, but they don't really know what they mean. So we have not actually spent all that much in terms of our military budget in Ukraine. You know what our military budget is every year in the United States? It's right at $1 trillion almost. So if we've given about $70 billion, it's going to be more than that by now. That's when I was there a couple months ago. But let's say it's 80 billion by now. If we've given them $80 billion, then that's about less than 1/10 of our annual budget for our military. Okay? Now, if you had gone to the military generals 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and said to them, look, we have this idea to put together this laboratory where you can test all of our American weaponry against actual, legitimate Russian weaponry with real Russian tactics on a real field of battle that'll be totally realistic, so you'll be able to tell how American weaponry stacks up against Russian weaponry. And it'll only cost you $80 billion. I would venture to say that the generals would have written that check all day long. They would have been very happy to spend that money. And if we said, oh, and by the way, if you spend that $80 billion, we will also degrade the actual Russian military by 50%. So we will cut them down, their combat power will go down 50%. And it won't cost a drop of American blood to do so. So we wipe out half the Russian military. That's essentially what's already happened in Ukraine. Their combat power has been diminished by about 50%. And that's not Ukraine saying that. That's third-party, open source intelligence sources and governmental intelligence sources that say that. They've lost about half of not half of their total military, half of their combat power, because a tank is worth more than an infantry soldier, right? So they've lost more than half their tanks. They've lost a tremendous number of aircraft and especially helicopters, trucks, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, you name it. Russia has been decimated on the field of battle in Ukraine. I was there. I've seen it. It's not fake. It really happened. And they are getting wiped out on the field of battle over there. Okay. So if we went to the generals and told them, spend $80 billion, you'll get to test American weaponry and tactics against Russian ones in real time, not lose any American soldiers, and decimate the Russian military. How is that not a bargain for $80 billion? How's that not a bargain? If we went down the list of things that the United States has spent $80 billion on, we spent more than that on boondoggle solar and alternative energy projects during the Obama administration that ended up going bankrupt and giving us nothing for our, politicians can waste $80 billion in a heartbeat, okay? All right, so that's a long answer to a short question, but I think it's a very good question. It's one that gets asked a lot, and I think you have to drill into these things to get some understanding of them, and that's what I'm here to do for you, okay? And besides, you gave me $20, you deserve a good answer. I hope that helped, Shauna. Okay, what does a U.S. Ranger do in the military? This is the hot zone, isn't it? I hope this is a hot zone, because now you got me freaked out. I didn't put this on CBN's. No, okay, it's a hot zone. You kind of worried me there for a minute. All right, so what does a U.S. Ranger do? Every special operations unit in the U.S. military has a specialty. The Green Berets, or U.S. Army Special Forces, specialize. Okay, I'm gonna dramatically simplify this now. So, if you are a military person, feel free to split hairs with me. But just understand, I'm generalizing, and I'm doing this just for the sake of time, okay? Special Forces Green Berets are teachers. Navy SEALs are guys that do stuff in the water, that specialize in doing stuff in the water. I'm not saying they can't do other things, but that's their specialty. Night Stalkers are very, very, very good helicopter pilots with lots of hours, lots of training. Rangers are the fighters. Rangers specialize in killing people and breaking things and doing it very quickly and efficiently. They are meant to be the most lethal fighting force America has. And so there's your difference, okay? I could make an entire podcast out of that, and maybe I will if you want to hear about it. I can go much deeper into all those and explain them a lot better, but that's the fast answer, okay? Ellen, thank you for the $5 super chat. My neighbor is William Mayville. His family and mine are good friends, interested in an interview. William Mayville. I think I've heard that name before, but you're going to have to explain who that is, Ellen. Sorry. Ellen, not Sarah Lee. Afghans sold American weapons to Hamas. We haven't seen proof of that yet. Has the Afghans sold some of the $86 billion worth of American weapons that were left in Afghanistan when the Americans pulled out? Have they made their way to Hamas? Very possible. We've seen some photographs that have made us wonder, but I haven't been able to clarify or actually confirm that yet because I haven't been to Gaza, and I'm very interested to know. That's a very good question. Any other? With the dissolution of the USSR and the ongoing current expansion of NATO to the Russian border, is this not poking the bear in the eye? Well, if your neighbor decides to paint his front door bright pink, or puts out 55 garden gnomes in his front yard, and you think it's ugly and you don't like it, or let's even say that your neighbor's having wild, lavish parties at his house till all hours of the night and keeping you awake with all the flashing lights and laughing people in the backyard. And you think he's having too many people over. But he's not breaking the law. He's not playing his music after hours too loud or anything like that, but he's annoying you and you want him to stop. There are ways that you could try to make him stop. You could go to the homeowners association, or you could maybe even put it out in the newspaper or something like that. Try to shame him. There are legal things you could do to try to counter that. But what you can't do is go burn his house down. So put that in the context of Russia. Russia didn't like what Ukraine was doing politically. Russia felt it made their tummy hurt that Ukraine wanted to be friends with the West and not be friends with Russia. And Vladimir Putin has wanted to rebuild the Soviet Union and create the Soviet reunion. But that doesn't give Russia the right to rape little babies and to randomly rocket civilian areas for 2 years. Does it? You think? Hey, there's another super chat. Thank you. General and Deputy Commander of Military. Oh. Well, I'd love to talk to him. If you can get me his information, send me an email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com. If you can set it up, I'd interview him in a heartbeat. That sounds great. Okay. Donegal has friends in Moldova that are concerned about NATO expansion. That's great. I was in Moldova. It's still a pretty repressive post-Soviet country. And they're moving more toward NATO because they're afraid of Russia. See, Russia created a self-fulfilling prophecy by attacking Ukraine. They were worried about Ukraine moving to the West. Ukraine didn't have a reason to move to try to join the EU until Russia started threatening it. So it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it was the same way with Moldova. President Erdogan has threatened Israel. Do I think Turkey will involve itself in the conflict? No. I don't think Turkey will involve itself in the conflict. Thank you for is that the Canadian peso? What is that? Canadian $10? That's great. Thank you. No, I don't think that they will involve themselves in the conflict militarily, because They're tied up on the border between Turkey and Syria, fighting the Kurds and fighting the Syrians. And how would they get their forces here? How would they get down here? They're not. They'd have to take over Syria first, and they've been trying to do that. Just take over a strip of land on the northern part of Syria for years, and they haven't succeeded at that yet. They do have the world's 8th largest military, so there's something to be reckoned with. But Erdogan is making funny noises to placate his people because he knows that Turks are up in arms about this. But isn't it funny how, so the Turks are with the Azeris against Armenia, but the Turks are against the Azeris with Israel, with respect to Israel, and like, what a mess this whole, I mean, this whole region is just a mess. What are the propaganda elements of this conflict, and what agenda would they be trying to push? Very good question. So the propaganda elements are the, okay, so you've heard me say the information war battle space is the actual battle space here. And in every modern war, the information battle space is the primary battle space. Underneath that is the kinetic battle space that is, the kinetic battle space is, bullets flying on the ground, right? The one that really makes a difference is the information battle space. So if you can win there, it doesn't really matter if you lose on the kinetic battle space or not. And you may, in fact, win in the kinetic battle space because you won in the information battle space. What I mean is, if Russia succeeds in making most people in the United States believe the lie that it's in America's best interest to stop supporting Ukraine in decimating Russian warfighting capability, then the United States might actually stop supporting Ukraine, and then Ukraine won't have what it needs to beat Russia, and Russia could win. Without that information, with the propaganda, Russia pushing on the United States, the U.S. would probably still be supporting Ukraine long enough for Ukraine to win. What I fear is that we'll end up doing the same thing that we did in Afghanistan, is we'll stay just until it's not politically expedient to be there anymore, and then we'll just bail, and we'll just leave Ukraine to its own devices, which would be another nail in the coffin of America's credibility overseas with any adversary or friend. Now, in this conflict, the information battle space, Israel is mostly losing. And that is creating a tremendous hardship for the Jewish people. Bibi Netanyahu gave a speech tonight that was intended to address that. You should go look it up. It was actually a really, really good speech. One of the things he said is that there is no moral equivalency. The moral high ground is held by Israel. And he was making that point over and over and over every way he could. You cannot draw a morally equivalent line between a group of people who celebrates when 1,500 of their troops invade another country and brutally rape and murder innocent civilians and children, and say that that's morally equivalent to a country that goes to its own defense, does everything it can to avoid civilian casualties, but there are still some civilian casualties because that's the nature of war. One group is intentionally trying to inflict harm on civilians and innocents. One group is intentionally trying to avoid harming innocents and civilians. The two are not not morally the same. The propaganda is anything that tries to make you believe that those two things are morally equivalent. Okay, there's the propaganda for you. All right, folks, I've got to run because I've got another live hit on Newsmax coming up, and I've got to prepare for that. Would I go into Gaza City? Absolutely, if I could go in with the IDF. I'm not going in front of the IDF. That's for darn sure. Be a good way to get hurt. All right, God bless you. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you all. I appreciate all the comments. I'm sorry for any of them that I didn't get to. If you want to contact me directly, hodzoneholton@gmail.com.